How can the economy be booming, but we the people be drowning? The responses in this post are an amazing example of how the plural of anecdote is absolutely not data. It's crazy. My mechanic just told me not to fix my car. Not worth it. These car dealers are out of their minds with what they want for these used high-mileage cars. I live in a nice house in a great neighborhood, but we have $60 left in our monthly food budget, so I will have to take money from someplace else. My insurance went up about $20 and I've never missed a payment or been late. They said it's company-wide. The chick that braids my hair just went up $50 and my son's birthday is on Thursday and Christmas is around the corner. WTF is happening? I'm definitely feel like I'm drowning. Sending out an SOS face with diagonal mouth. Here's one more perspective. You see all those houses in the US that people live in? I'm talking about houses, not apartments. There's a ton of houses, right? You can see them everywhere wherever you drive around. A good number of them are not renting. They either own those houses outright, or are paying a mortgage and are locked into a favorable rate. This means all the pressure is on us, the ones who are paying rent and are stuck in the rent trap. This is the first time in my life I've seen public sentiment so detached from economic data, but in my opinion, it's a perfect corporate storm. Unemployment is down, but only because gig work is up. So I'd imagine anyone making $13 per hour delivering food on Grubhub is counted as legally employed, despite not necessarily working full-time or making enough to make ends meet. Inflation raised the prices of everything the typical consumer needs, coupled with a ton of layoffs, turned into massive profits for corporations and investors. Credit debt is climbing exponentially, but with the optics of economic growth, it appears to be stimulating the market on borrowed money with large interest rates. We are, once again, kicking the can down the road in a massive debt problem that will eventually bite us in the ass in a spectacular fashion. There's a gap between wages, prices, investments, and the big one, liquidity. The boom in liquidity we saw since 2020 created a large wage price spiral. Prices went up as the liquidity was spent. Wages went up to support the price increases. And people who owned commodities and capital did well, since as prices rose the value of their investments went up. Then we get to the great inflation, and the Federal Reserve increasing rates. What happens there is the liquidity starts drying up, which is much harder to get out of asset prices and commodities than wages, since a company or person is more likely to just not hire people or spend money than try to sell its inventory at a loss. So we get to the last part. The wages have stagnated, but the prices are continuing to rise. Consumers are still spending like crazy and maxing out their credit cards, so prices are staying up, even if the wages aren't there to support it. If you own a house or stocks, it's great, because you're basically sucking up what liquidity is left over when someone buys a new iPhone and you own Apple stock. Because the way the success of the economy is often measured is using metrics that don't reflect the everyday experiences of most people. If the economy were judged by other metrics like wealth disparity, median disposable income, food poverty, and homelessness, nobody would be saying it's booming. Economist here. Part of the answer was demonstrated by widely respected economist Thomas Piketty through math and empirical data in his recent work, Capital in the 21st Century. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/capital in the 21st century. The core of the problem is that inequality is growing as capital is inherently overpowered and also undertaxed, i.e. Warren Buffett paying lower tax rate than his cleaning lady. Capital will also always accelerate and accumulate faster than the rest of the productive economy. Regardless of taxation, this problem is then compounded by other dynamics observed by the economist Kenneth Galbraith. He demonstrates that the rich, entrenched wealth, capital, exerts an overweight influence on the economy through politics. Galbraith argues that we are moving towards essentially a planned economy. In other words, if only a few massive corporations control whole markets and sectors, we lose the equalizing force of free markets. Today's semi-planned economy is not the free market with mom and pop corner store competitiveness Adam Smith envisioned. Possible solutions are demonetizing the political system and taxing the rich more. One of the main things preventing this from happening is that it's easier to grab a hold of simple narratives like, "We aren't woke enough," or "Build the wall." These simple narratives are appealing as they channel people's growing frustration but ultimately distract and prevent both sides from addressing the root causes above. On a positive note, there are some great studies coming out in economics about ways to tackle these problems that are hopefully quite appealing to everyone. Like universal basic income. Argue all you want, but the data and math don't lie. When you remove means testing and the bureaucracy required for and account for the positive economic growth, UBI is looking more and more like a better deal for the economy. https www.businessinsider.com/basisincomstudicagnari Defining Nature of Work 20181. Because many economic statistics don't account for wealth distribution. Because the economy is not for us. Former equity trader here. It blows my mind how confidently wrong most of these comments are. LMAO. Lost so many brain cells scrolling through this comment section. Woozy face. I saw another post on Reddit where some data was showing how biased and wrong Americans are in thinking the economy is doing worse than it actually is. The number one comment was, "Ignore the data, lol." I think there are a few things. Most importantly, we live in an economically hierarchical system, so no matter how well the economy as a whole is doing, some people are going to feel like they are drowning. Inequality is also increasing over time, so the percentage of people who are doing very poorly compared to the average is also increasing as the high end gets more concentrated. There are also some things that are more about perception. Everyday people's understanding of how well the economy is doing tends to be based more on some factors than others. So, for example, for a long time housing prices were rising much faster than other things. More recently food prices have really increased a lot even as other inflation has cooled down a bit. Both of those prices tend to have a bigger impact on our perceptions of how we're doing because they are so front and center in our lives. By and large, the economy is booming. If you're rich and have significant investments in real estate or the stock market, they're not measuring the health of the economy based on the average family. It's also more profitable for them to say the economy is great, because all the metrics say the economy is great. Stocks are up, unemployment is super low, and inflation and interest rates are easing. This is a good, soft landing to the recession that could have been. https www.morningbrew.com/daily/stories/2023/12/08/Wemite Belclear on economic soft landing. In recent times we've seen a much stronger disconnect between the normal economic indicators and what that actually means for real people. Experts are weighing in on this phenomenon and don't really know how to account for it. If I had to guess, I would say that the gap is widening between the haves and the have-nots. That is inarguable. But that also means that the haves are living in a different economy, world. They have investments. They have homes they own. They have disposable income. And raising prices by 20% is inconvenient but not life-changing. Then, many people in the have not category are feeling extreme pressure in all these areas. The economic factors are powered by what the haves are doing, and so they look good. But when the majority of the country is not in that category, then it creates this weird disconnect. Obviously, those two categories are painting with a broad brush, and there are many more levels of separation throughout all income levels. But even people who are still comfortable can also acknowledge a difference, and that can still create pressure. Even comfortable people might not be as comfortable as they were before, and that feeling only increases the further down the income range you go. The top 10% of Americans have 70% of all wealth. The bottom 50% own 2.5%. So if 50% of Americans lose absolutely everything, the economy doesn't even take a hit as long as they go to work in the morning and keep making the people on top more money. It's all a lie. Inflation and politician math. The economy hasn't been good since 2018 or so, but those with an agenda will do gymnast math to tell you differently. Over the last 40 years, the middle class has been gutted. 40 years ago, the middle class earned 60% of the income and the upper class earned 30%. Now the middle class earns 40% and the upper class earns 50%. This is ongoing, and the shift will continue unless we stop it. Supply-side economics is causing this. We must put an end to this ASAP. I feel that most middle class and below are struggling with student debt, food price increase, mortgage increase, etc. A lot of people feel that most people are struggling. And yet most people are not in fact struggling. We are experiencing an incredible disconnect where most people are doing well but are under the impression that everyone else is not. I could speculate at length about the various interests who are encouraging you to think things are bad.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.